At $200, a Super Nintendo setup costs twice as much as the old system. For the money, the company promises better pictures, sound, and adventure. Now you're playing with power, superpower. You're the king, I tell you! The king!
Only for Super NES.
Only on Super NES.
You're listening to the SNES Podcast with your host, Soulblazer.
Hello, everybody. This is Greg, joined always by Joe.
Hello.
We are covering today on the Super NES Podcast, episode number 221, a pick I'm sure that Joe made because he probably was more interested in this game than I was. We're covering The Jungle Book, which came out for numerous systems. We'll talk about the other systems briefly, but obviously this being Super NES Podcast, the main focus will be on the Super NES port of the game. So, I say port because this game, like several other games, was originally designed like the Genesis first, and then ported to the systems later on. I assume, Joe, Genesis like is where you were first exposed this game at.
Yeah.
So, the game came out with Genesis in 1994. And then got released on other systems later on that year. As well too. So, most Disney games for Nintendo systems were done by Capcom, but conversely, most Disney games for Genesis systems were done by Virgin Virgin Interactive Entertainment. They won't use their full name, and this game's no exception. The Jungle Book actually started development in-house at Virgin. At least on the projects. The game, however, was not yet complete when the lead programmer and most of his buddies, Virgin, decided to jump ship and go form their own company. So that left the game in a kind of mostly finished but still not quite finished state. By the way, as a side note, those people went out to form Shiny Entertainment, who had a pretty good track record over the years. They were around. They did the Earthworm Jim, MDK, and Into the Matrix games. So I can forgive the leaving Virgin to go do their own thing. So obviously Virgin wanted to finish the game, if possible, to recoup the time and/or money they'd spent on it. But the sudden departures left them unable to finish the game themselves. So they ended up turning the game over to another British company called Eurocom. And Eurocom's the one who actually finished the game up and then handled most of the porting duties the game after that. So Eurocom we haven't talked about yet here. So they're British company. So again, most of their games were either released just in Europe or more for British sensibilities. They were mostly known for their arcade to console ports. They only did really a few original properties themselves. They were around from 1988 to 2012. The original games they did themselves, however, are usually pretty good. They did Magician for the NES, which is more of a Zelda kind of RPG. Machine Hunter, which is a shooter that came out for Windows, a PlayStation. 40 Winks, which was a platformer game, and Sphinx and the Cursed Mummy, which is an action-adventure game that came out with the GameCube, PS2, and Xbox. So, like I said, not really all that known here in the States, but the track record, but considering they did mostly ports, their track record's pretty good. So, they actually, I think you mentioned before, before Mike, you played this game, Joe. Their very last release game was 007 Legends.
Oh, nice.
So,
yeah, that was a pretty good game.
Yeah. So yes, Eurocom was a pretty good company to have to get to finish off the game. So after came out Genesis, it was ported to other systems as I mentioned. Pretty impressive list of systems they got this game, actually. I guess they figured that, maybe Eurocom figured that most of the engine's done already. There's no it wouldn't take too much time or effort to port the game to other systems. Or maybe Jungle Book was just really like something that considered to be like a very like popular game because this was before. Yeah, there really wasn't anything going on with Jungle Book at the time because it's like the original movie came out in 19. The original Disney movie came out in 1967, but the sequel and live action films didn't come out until like 2000s.
My assumption here was that this was corresponding with the VHS release. Because Disney was going through and doing the whole Disney Classics first round of Disney Vault stuff at this time.
Yep.
So I figured that this was to help not only boost the VHS sales, but the VHS would also boost sales for the game.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. I hadn't thought about that. So like, I was like, good catch. So, anyway, Jungle Book also came out, came out on the Super NES, obviously we're talking about it here. NES, surprisingly enough, this was, I realized that may raise eyebrows for people out there because 1994, but this was one of the very last NES games to like be released, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
So, and the game looks gorgeous. You like the system. It also came out with the Master System, Game Boy, Game Gear, and also DOS and Windows. DOS and Windows are the only version of the game that Eurocom did not handle themselves. All the other console versions of the game, Eurocom did handle the porting for. So, anyway, because the game is ported, it's both the same and yet not the same across the systems. So. Let me try to explain that. The engine's the same across the board. The actual game mechanics are the same. The plot's the same. Most versions of the games, the games have the cutscenes. The music's the same across the board. Where it really differs, however, is level design. Because of course, some systems were better at doing certain things than other systems. So to sort of accommodate that, they reworked the levels for all the levels, like for all the versions of the game, to be able to handle those pros and cons like more accordingly. So while you're doing the same things pretty much on a version of the game, the actual how you're playing the game platforming is very different. That may be frustrating to some people who prefer to get good at one version of the game. However, I can also see it offering replay value. If you do enjoy this game, you finish Genesis version, for example, play the Super NES version, see other levels different, that kind of stuff. So, but anyway, the plot of the game pretty much follows the plot of the books. You're playing Mogi, the young boy who's raised like wolves, and you're basically trying to leave your home, go to a human village. So there are characters, notable characters from the book and movies do show up here in the game as well. Also, either as cameos, or boss battles or whatever. So. So, Joe, you have more experience with this game than I do. Do you want to talk about the gameplay and kind of, and if you remember how this, how the Super NES version of the game compares in your mind to the Genesis version?
Yeah, so I remember the Genesis version being pretty challenging. This, I want to say, came out either before or just after the Lion King game. And this very much felt the same way, as far as difficulty is concerned. It's an action platformer, so you get to jump around as Mowgli. You can shoot bananas. You swing from vines. And the thing too is I can't remember if the Genesis did the same thing it does here in the Super Nintendo version. But here you can collect gems that can help you get extra lives and go to bonus levels and whatnot.
Right.
And, I like I said, I don't remember that being in the Genesis one, but it could have been. It's been quite a while since I played the Genesis version.
Right, fair enough.
In general, it was one of those, I remember the frustration of playing the Genesis one. Like I said, aptly compared to The Lion King. The same thing. It's that precise jumping, and it asks you to be pretty much pixel perfect.
So speaking about Lion King, because that was a good point that was a good point that you just raised. So I looked it up. Lion King did come out the same year, like in 1994. However, it was developed by different companies. Westwood Studios, Westwood Studios and Disney themselves worked together on Lion King. So Virgin did publish the game. They published the game as well. Because they had the license to Disney stuff, obviously, but
right.
And also curious, to speak about the NES. The Lion King NES game was only released in Europe, and it's the final licensed NES game worldwide. Of the side note, so I think gameplay probably is similar between Lion King and Jungle Book just by necessity, because we've already covered Lion King on this platform on this platform podcast in the past. Probably not 5 times fast. So I think. I mean, it makes sense that two games play similarly, even though they've done by different companies, because it's they're both platformers. It's you can't really, and this is something I'm going to talk about later on as well. How many ways can you revolutionize a platformer? You can't really. So, so it makes sense that it makes sense that the gameplay does kind of feel similar, in some ways.
Yeah, and one of the other things I compared this game to, having gone back and played it, is and you have covered this game in the past. It very much felt like Pitfall: The Mayan Adventure.
Yeah, I can see that too. Yep.
It's very much the same kind of platforming and exploration gameplay, but it also has that very frustrating enemies pop out of nowhere. There are vines in this game. Some of them can be swung on. Some of them cannot. It's not necessarily very clearly indicated which are which. And everything being animal based is also an issue with this game, because you have to kill enemies, and those enemies are animals. But then there's also points where the animals actually help you. You can jump on a snake and be able to get to a higher platform. But also snakes drop down from the trees and attack you. So it's really I compare it to Lion King and Pitfall: The Mayan Adventure, and in that comparison, it's it's got some of the gameplay and platformy tropes that Pitfall has, but it requires the trial and error that was in Lion King. You really have to memorize what's going on in the level to be able to anticipate what is to be done next. I don't know, man. And maybe I'm jumping too far ahead here, but this is it was very frustrating to be playing this game. And it overall, good gameplay for what it is. And, it accomplishes itself as a game, and there's only a few bosses, so there's not too much to contend with.
Sure.
But I just felt like the whole, you have to memorize what's coming up and everything else. Just I reserve that for Metroid and Castlevania and those games. I do it because I want to move forward. There were multiple times in Jungle Book where I was just I'd just rather hit the power button.
Yeah. No, I think I think that's a very good summary of the game, and I certainly share many of the same frustrations with the game that you did. The fact that things that definitely when it comes to platformers, that things if things are telegraphed clearly as to what's actually okay to use and what not, that certainly is frustrating. So, and to the game's credit, however, there are some things about the game that I really do like. There's three difficulty options, for example: easy, normal, and hard. So it just allows some flexibility as to how difficult a game that you want to have here. The powers of this game I liked. You start off just being you start off with just like a simple banana a weapon / light projectile, but you're able to collect things like invincibility mask and coconuts and double banana shots and my favorite my personal favorite, the boomerang bananas. So like the power-ups, they're themed for the game very well. They're also like very good power-ups. So I thought overall the power-up system, the system in this game, was well done.
Yeah, I agree with that. And coconuts being like bowling balls, and your mangoes and melons kind of being a longer range attack were nice. The one thing that kind of struck me as a little odd was the tiki masks, because it's cool, they give you invincibility for a little bit, and that's great, but I don't remember tiki masks ever being a thing in the movie, and I just feel like they kind of put that in there just to put it in there.
They probably did. I think, but overall, it fits the theme pretty well. So it's I really didn't have a problem with that. So
yeah, and to be fair, we're talking Virgin here, and just like Aladdin, they worked with the animators to get the detail just right. Mm-hmm. Fantastic presentation, the music. I'm sorry, I'm jumping ahead, but I have to focus on these positives. The music is fantastic. The sound effects and sounds in general, I think lack a little bit, but the sound effects, the music is spot on. It is exactly what I would expect a 16-bit rendition of the bare necessities, and even King Louie's theme when you're fighting him as a boss is playing in the background, and it sounds exactly as you'd expect. And
right. Yeah.
It's things like that those are the things that made Aladdin as good as it was. You know what I mean?
So interesting. Yes, interesting footnote here, because he's kind of in the news these days, video game circles, for the wrong reasons. 3 people worked on the music for this game. One of them being the infamous Tommy Tallarico. So
he was great at one point. Let's be fair.
Yeah, definitely. Music, musician-wise, he's very, very talented. So yes. I thought I heard a lot of his works, however. So as I realized that he did some of the music for this game, I wanted to point that out.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But yeah, I was surprised. They actually had Disney songs in this game, because usually Disney's very protective about that. So the fact that they were able to get Disney songs included in this was a nice touch.
Yeah, agreed.
I do not, as a rule, tend to like games which you have to collect X number of things to be able to move on. But that's what this game requires you to do. You have to find a certain number of gems before you can move on to each stage. How many gems you have to find depending on the difficulty level. I'd rather just platform, because for me, if I'm a platformer, I just want to platform from beginning to end. I don't want to try to go about the hassle of trying to find X number of stuff to be allowed to move on. So that certainly adds to frustration, and some of the artificial challenge that this game has, I think, in a large part. So
yeah, I definitely feel like that was padding. This we haven't talked about it yet, but you have 4 hearts. And 4 continues to be able to beat 11 stages. The stages are presented really nice because it's a chapter in the book of the Jungle Book.
Yes.
So that's a really nice touch. But the reality is there's 3 bosses in this game. And one
Pretty
you
much.
fight twice. You have Shere Khan, who obviously is the big bad at the end.
Right.
And, they all have their patterns and stuff. You start off with Khan the snake, which it's a boss fight. I feel like it's a buggy mess, or it was just poorly programmed, because like his hypnotized beam is almost like homing, and it's like you're guaranteed to be taking damage no matter what. It's just a matter of like how it hits you as to how much damage you take. And then you fight King Louis actually twice. You fight him once, and then his Monkey Cities crumbles, and then you have to fight him again. And in both instances, that plays his theme song from him dancing around in the movie. So that was very much appreciated, and that goes back to like they used the right music at the right time, and it's very nice.
Yes,
but I mean, this game is short. There are no passwords. There's no save system. You have checkpoints that the junior elephants will wave a flag showing that you hit the checkpoint. If God forbid you miss one of those checkpoints, you're starting all the way back at the beginning. So definitely find all those checkpoints if you
also have
that
continues. It's like you're always continues, and very nicely you're able to gain additional continues like by collecting a certain number of gems.
Correct.
So yes, that also helps. So yeah, this game, I think this game is more tailored toward kids, obviously, but all that stuff you just mentioned, Joe, it definitely adds to that as well too. But playing on hard though, definitely has a challenge. So I think it's just something. Older kids, I think definitely would still be able to get something out of this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think yes, there is a difficulty curve here as you change the difficulty itself. But I think the base game itself has enough of a challenge to, entice someone to come in and play and stick with it for a little bit. One other little charming thing I just want to mention real quick is every time you die, these little ambulance monkeys come and pick you up.
Oh, yes.
And I swear those monkeys are a prototype for what would later become Ape Escape, because in Ape Escape, there's quite a few monkeys that have like little red sirens on their head. But yeah, so it was just one of those things. Like I totally forgot that little tidbit while playing the game, and it came back to me. That was the first thing I thought. It was like, oh, like in 2 years, almost 3 years, we'd be getting Ape Escape, and like I was just like, oh, it's the Ape Escape monkeys.
Right. So great points. So, with the exception of a few boss fights, like you mentioned previously, I thought for the most part that the controls and hit detection in this game were pretty good. I mean, yes, there's the problem about having to. There's a problem that having to pick so perfect precision on some jumps to be able to make them. But for the most part, I thought the game was responsive when it wanted to be responsive. So
yeah. I agree with that.
My frustration with the game was more because of the very narrow hit points and also the Windows to land on things, not so much the controls itself. Because I thought the actual controls and hit detection was fine. I just didn't like how the game, I just didn't like how the hit detection boxes and the platforming was programmed in some ways.
Yeah, and I think they do a pretty good job of like hiding most of that. It really shines when you're trying to get around on the vines.
Oh,
and I will die on that hill. The vines, if they had completely removed the vines, yes, that kind of changes the whole game. But like if they had completely removed that, we'd be probably singing the praises of this game, because for the most part, it's pretty damn good.
But the vines also, the vines also are the one real unique thing that they're. Unique thing this game has,
Correct.
I mean, yes, Pitfall has them as well too, but it's like, and because of the source material, you've got to have vines because how much of the book in the movie does he spend swinging around vines? A lot. Right. So, no, the vines I thought they could have done better, yes, but I did like them being in the game, like as part of the game. So, but. We mentioned the graphics a little bit. The graphics overall I thought were like very, very good. The background graphics are gorgeous. I just kind of felt that maybe some of the characters, like Mogwai, they looked a little bit off to me for some reason. I'm not really sure I can put my finger exactly on it, but it's like Mogwai, for example, looks very like lanky and kind of like doesn't blend in very well with the background very well, I thought. So,
I mean, he looks as he does in the movie. He is kind of lanky and whatnot. Yeah. I didn't have an issue with Mowgli's sprite. I felt his sprite was a little too big.
Yeah,
which kind of, you know, other than that, like, I thought the enemy sprites for the most part are, you know, decent and serviceable. Obviously, where you're going to see those sprites shine is towards the end when you get to the exit. Sometimes Baloo is there and Mowgli will do a little dance with them. And it's nice to see those little touches. And of course, the boss fights. Khan, King Louie, Shere Khan, they look fantastic. And, you know, that adds to the difficulty of the boss fight because you're in awe of the graphics. And like, also, like, I found this game to be really vibrant, as it should be, because you're in a jungle. The only level that's really kind of drab, and again, it should be, is the last fight with Shere Khan, where you're in a burning, you know, forest, you know, because this is like Africa, and like, that's what happens. I think it's India, but you get what I'm saying. Like, there's fires that instantly happen sometimes because of the dry season and whatever. So, like, you know, I thought that was really good that they kind of, you know, restricted that kind of drab look to specifically that last level, and I was perfectly okay with it. Does it change the tone of the entire game a little bit? Yeah, it does. But also, like, it fits the narrative that, you know, is the Jungle Book. So it's not like it was like, oh my God, so shocking.
Yep, I agree with that. And yeah, so you already mentioned the music. The music. I agree with you. So I agree with you. The music overall in this game looks very good. It is fun to listen to. It is fun to listen to the songs across the different versions of the game to see how the different hardware handled it. So because it's like, it sounds good across the board, but it's like definitely the Super NES, the Genesis, of course, because they're 16-bit capabilities, definitely make the song sing. Because while it sounds good on the 8-bit systems, there's certainly, you know, obviously it's more limited on there because of the hardware.
Yeah, and out of those two, like, I'm sorry, the Super Nintendo, it was so much better.
That's actually a very good segue to moving on, like, toward the end. Like we're talking about, so like when we covered the reviews, most people consider the Genesis version of the game like to be the superior of the two versions.
Really?
Most because they felt that it was faster, because that game had more varied gameplay, like brighter graphics.
Okay.
I mean, the Genesis version was developed first. Everything else supported that version of it. So, like, I get that. You know, that makes sense to me. So, in the Genesis version, I played the Gen version a little bit to compare it. It does play faster, for sure. So, the Genesis version is brighter for some reason, which is a contrast because usually Genesis version it's more washed out. But yeah, so. The gameplay, however, that's more your personal opinion because as I said before, the level design differs from version of the game. So it's like, you know, I guess just like people back then prefer the Genesis level design compared to the Super NES level design. So, but yeah, generally speaking, across the board, while the versions of the game rated every version of the game rated very highly actually. Like in the Game Boy version of the game, got like high marks. It generally got mixed reviews across the board, but generally people did think that all the versions of the game were at least decent in playability. But at least as far as contemporary reviews, the Genesis version of the game did get like higher rankings. To give you one example, and you know it's slight. Like for example, EGM gave EGM actually was one of the ones that was actually one of the few ones that they gave a higher score to the Super NES. They gave the Super NES version 7.8 compared to like 7 for the Genesis version. But but GamePro was almost the exact opposite as far as as far as I went. So, yeah, I guess just like a matter of a personal opinion. So, it was a very interesting thing to see that. I actually missed this coming out, but this game was included like more like recent collections. If you want to play this game legally, like it's a bit easier to find these days. The Super NES Genesis Game Boy versions of the game were included alongside Aladdin and Lion King as part of the Disney Classic Games collection, which came out for the Switch, PS4, Windows, and Xbox One back in 2021. So I don't know if that's still sold, but I'm sure you can find a copy of that like pretty easily these days.
Yeah, you can still get that, and it was DLC. So the thing that stung about that, so I had purchased the original one, which gave you Lion King and Aladdin, and they did a really nice thing where, like, at first it was just the Genesis and Game Boy versions, and then they had like an uncut version that I guess had some missing content. And then with an update, they added the Super Nintendo version of both games, which was really nice. And then they announced, hey, we're going to do the Jungle Book in the same form, and it's going to be DLC. But they charged $20 for the DLC, and that was...
It's Disney, I'm not surprised.
Yeah, it was one of those things where it was like, I get it. Like, you should get paid for the effort that you put into, porting the game or whatever. But it was like, it's the Jungle Book, and like the Jungle Book more than Aladdin and Lion King was very much the same game across all consoles. So I don't know. That one just particularly stung for me. And I was like, of all the things that you could have added as DLC, like, why didn't you do like, say, the Little Mermaid game for the Genesis, or
they can't. That's Capcom. Actually, no, I'm sorry. The NES version was Capcom. I don't know who did Genesis version actually, but
yeah, and it's the same thing with like the Beauty and the Beast game for the Genesis. Like there was two of those. Those could have easily been brought over as well. And to your Capcom point, they obviously were able to negotiate to get Aladdin added to the collection. So I don't think the fact that Capcom,
Yeah, there was a Capcom Disney collection also too, right? I thought.
It was not the Saturday morning. What is it? The Disney Afternoon collection. It's got
that was
DuckTales 1 and 2, Chip and Dale 1 and 2, and Tailspin. I actually have that on my on my fiance's PS4. Great game.
Yeah. So, but yeah, interesting. So, but yeah, so it's like many of these games don't get like re-released. So, when a game is included as part of a collection, like I wanted to call it out. So,
yeah, absolutely.
But now, I imagine it plays fine because if the typically probably just using an emulator. So, I don't think that'd be a problem. So.
I was going to say, I can report with the Aladdin and Lion King ports at least. They played just fine, and they actually gave you all the, filter options that you could want. Yeah. So, like, if you want that grainy picture like it's on a CRT, you had that filter. So, right. And I'm sure they had the same filters for the Jungle Book part of it as well.
Yeah. Definitely sounds good. So one of the quick thing I wanted to mention, like about the reviews, because the other reviews, because it kind of like ties to my like final thoughts. GamePro's biggest criticism of the game was that they thought the platforming was like pretty repetitive across the board because because the game centered upon the vine swinging ability so much because like it did before. The game would have been better with the vines either decreased or removed altogether? I mean, maybe yes, but then if you do that, you're taking out a big chunk of the source material, which is games trying to appeal to. Right. I do think the developers put too much emphasis upon the vine swinging because for the most part, I agree with what GamePro said. It's like as a platformer, it's fine. But I think there are better platformers in the system, definitely bar none. It's like, there are things recommended in this game. The graphics are gorgeous. The music's very good. The game does a pretty good job of following the book, the movie, like, for the most part. But it's like, you're spending so much of the game spent either, like, trying to figure out which vines to swing on, or swing on the vines, or trying to collect all the gems in time, or gems time, like, whatnot. It's not a long game. Long plays of this game are like around an hour long. But it's like those limitations that the limitations that the game imposes upon you does suck some of the fun out of it. So it's like, I also got bored of the game after a while. I finished it, but I'm like, okay, I've seen one stage, I've seen them all pretty much. Right. There really wasn't. And maybe some of that's due to the fact that the game's half finished before we giving somebody else to finish up. Maybe it's because they tried to tie in the critical plot points too much, like the detriment of gameplay. That's always a difficult thing when it comes to, like, games based upon existing properties, movies, comics, whatever. It's like, how much do you want to incorporate, but also sacrifice like the purposes they had to make a better gameplay. It's like, Spider-Man. We'll talk about Spider-Man here as an example real quick, because Spider-Man 2 just came out as of recording this. Spider-Man 2 does deviate from the established canon in some key areas. However, they did that for the element of gameplay. They understood the developers understood the main appeal of Spider-Man is swinging around New York City, and like the other two in spades. Yeah. So it's like, and also the fights, and also, like, the corny, cheesy one-liners that Peter Parker's known for. So the developers doubled down on all that. They do change things around in terms of the established canon for the purpose of the gameplay, but because they're emphasizing the fun things so much, it doesn't matter. I think that I think of this game, the developers may have tried to stick a little bit too close to the established canon and plot, i.e., spending so much time swinging around vines and sacrifice gameplay because of it, unfortunately. So it's not a bad game by any means. Like, it's perfectly fine service a platformer game, but it's better than that. But it's more like, when you compare it to the Capcom Disney games, it's like, it's just not. There's no comparison. The Mickey Mouse games also, for example, on Genesis, much better games than this is. Yeah. Because again, they did a better job of incorporating what Mickey can do into, like, a fun gameplay. Because, like, you were here when we covered the Mickey platformers last year, Joe. Yeah. Those games much more fun because they used Mickey in a more fun way. Yeah, absolutely. Whether or not, I don't think this is, like, Mowgli's fault, because Mowgli, how established is Mowgli as a character? Probably not very deep, probably. So it's like, I think the developers tried to make up for it in some ways, and it's like, we can criticize whether they made the right choices or not. Because I recognize the challenge the programmers had in doing that, because the character like more shallow. Don't get me wrong, Jungle Book's fine material, but it's fine material like the game out of. But because Lion King also worked better. But Lion King overall, I thought, was a better game because those developers made better game design choices. So in end, it's a fine Disney game. It's just not like one of the better ones. And, like, I can't really see young kids would have fun with this game still. I think nowadays, but anybody else, it's like there are much better platformer games like out there. Yeah, agreed. So I know I went off there for a while. Was there anything else you wanted to add on to that?
No, I mean, final closing thoughts would be like, you should check this out. This is definitely worth, going and checking out. I'm also, like, I'm pretty sure this is very affordable. So if you're a collector, this is going to be in your collection.
It is. Like, we'll get to that in a moment.
Yeah. And, like, despite the vines and the slight hit detection being off, I think this is a great game. Well, no, I won't say a great game. It is a good game. That has enough good points in which it should be played. And I don't think, because I saw some pretty harsh reviews of this game, and I don't think it deserves that hate that I was seeing. I think this falls into the same category as Lion King. It's gorgeous, it's challenging, and if you're willing to put in the effort to hit that challenge head on, I think it's an enjoyable experience and one that you'll come back to again and again.
Okay. Yep. I think it's maybe one. I think it's maybe like one of the rare cases where you like the game better than I did, because usually the other way around. But,
yeah.
So there are some cheat codes in this game. Not a lot. As a matter of fact, 2 cheats are still unknown to this day what they actually do in the game. So, but the known cheat codes. One cheat code gives you 88 of each weapon. Another one like allows you to float, and the last one allows you to advance frames. So those something could be useful. Useful cheat codes in some situations.
The floating one is ridiculous. I saw a video of that.
It is.
Like, I was just like, I get why you would do that, because, as we spoke, it's that hit detection on the vines and whatnot. So, like, I get why that cheat would have been there, because even the developers were like, screw this. But, I'm watching that in motion and being used, like, it's just Mowgli, like, spinning in a circle, like somersaulting, his flip animation when he's flipping on the vines just over and over again. So it just looks weird because he's like weirdly deformed as he's floating across the screen. That was just one of those. I actually was going to mention that, but I knew you'd be talking about the cheats, so I figured I'd wait.
Well, the vast majority of cheat codes are actually created by the developers while they're actually making the game, so they could both either debug certain things in the game as they're going through it, or because they want to simply get past certain areas because they're not very good at the game, or they want to test something out like a whatnot. And that is how the famous Konami code got started, after all, because it's like the developer, because the developer Gradius was not very good at his own game, so he gave himself the extra lives code to help playtest it. So most of the time cheat codes are just like left to the game, because it's like programmers are afraid are afraid when a game is finished to go in there and rip out code because they don't know like what it might do. So that's why cheat codes are usually left to the games, and this is like no exception. I'm sure the developers had that flow code in there so they could rapidly go through stages to make sure everything like working correctly and whatnot. So, but they're fun.
Yeah.
So yeah, as you guessed, Joe, this game is very common on eBay. It was also very hard to get accurate numbers for this, because, like I said, it was released on separate different consoles. So trying to narrow Super NES only copies can be difficult for sure. But there are about 160 copies of this game currently listed on eBay at the time of doing research. 46 copies of the game had recently sold. As you guessed, Joe, cart is very plentiful and also very cheap.
Yeah.
These prices go shipping. Cart prices of the game range anywhere from $7 to $17. So. CIB options were much more limited, however. I don't know why this game was so much I don't know why this game was so much harder to find a complete form. Maybe just a bad time on eBay right now to find it, but
because kids do not keep boxes.
True. Yeah.
That I find that with a lot of kid oriented or kid focused games, is that boxes, manuals, those are always hard to come by because we didn't care back then. And I think about it, every time I got a Game Boy game, what did I do? I opened it up, I took the plastic, covering with the game out of the box, and then I immediately threw the box in the trash. Manuals and boxes just meant nothing. So I can understand why it'd be a little harder to find.
Yeah. So yeah, and certain systems are also like more durable than others. For example, the old Genesis clamshell cases
Yes.
are more commonly found these days because they were very nice and durable. So in television games, also back in the day, back in the 80s, a lot of those boxes and manuals existed. They also like the same reason because they were like more durable boxes. Many television games, compared to the flip-top style that most systems used, the television games for most of their lifetime were done like in an open kind of like manner, in which like you open up the box and like the cards on one side and manuals on the other. So for those reasons, the television boxes or manuals are more commonly found these days than than many other ones. But yeah, depends on the system. But yeah, kid games definitely for sure. There wasn't much out there to be found as far as that went, at least not like right now. Cart manual combinations sold for $14, so affordably priced. One CIB copy of the game did sell recently for $50, which is not bad, like all things considered. And there's even a sealed copy of the game that sold at a very affordable sealed price of a sealed price of $99. So, again, common prices reflect. It's weird in this case because like the prices both reflect how common the game is and how uncommon the game is, like in complete form. So, it's definitely more a weird combination, like in this case. But yeah, so there are other Disney games we will be covering. I think there's at least like one Disney game left, which we have not covered yet. So we will cover more Disney games in the future, I'm sure. So, but anyway, any final thoughts or anything else you want to say, Joe, before we wrap up here?
No, I think we've pretty much covered this one.
Okay. All right. So next time on the podcast, we are going to be having the first of two, if everything works out, hopefully, guest appearances. I don't want to announce anybody yet because things may change. I'm also afraid of jinxing things, but et cetera, et cetera. So, but if everything goes well, the next episode coming to you will be a special episode with a guest. We are both revisiting a game we've covered in the past, way back when, the early days of the podcast, ActRaiser, because Joe's never played the game, and also because the guest host who hopefully be having on is also a big fan of the game. But we're also be covering also ActRaiser 2, and also briefly the newer remake of the game, like ActRaiser Renaissance. So 3 games in one, like that episode. So one of 2 guest host appearances that we have planned between now and the end of the year. So stay tuned for that. So that should be a lot of fun. I know how Joe feels about simulation games, but I've also told him that ActRaiser, the simulation is very, 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 very light. So hopefully, at least at the point that we can tolerate it.
Yeah. So just real quick. So I in the PS2 era, I had a game called Dark Cloud, which is very much
I've heard that game, yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I heard a lot of people say it was the spiritual successor to ActRaiser, blah, 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 because it's the same sort of thing where it's an RPG where you go out and you defeat monsters and whatever else, and then you unlock parts of a city so that you can rebuild. So it's one of those, I've always had some sort of ambition to check the game out. It's just not one that's ever pulled me so tightly that I've been I have to check it out.
Yeah.
Now I don't have a choice. It's an assignment. I have to do it.
Dark Cloud actually always struck me as being more, as I said, more common Soul Blazer, because that whole rebuilding the town, piece by piece element to it. But ActRaiser definitely has an influence on it too, I think. So, but yeah. So okay. All right. So that should be coming for you next time, folks. If everything goes right, to cross your fingers, and if not, we'll have something else for you. I'm sure. Don't worry.
Yeah.
So anyway. thank you as always for joining us. Questions, comments, feedback, etc. can be left on our Facebook page, or you can also send me an email directly if you want to at the SNES Podcast at yahoo.com. Joe, how can they reach you at?
You should definitely Google the Radical Retro Roundup, which is not family friendly, so be advised. Outside of the Radical Retro Roundup, you can find me on, apparently it's X now. To me, it's still Twitter. At JoeSux30. I don't update too much there. It's better to find me on Facebook, and I'm accessible via Facebook, but just be mind that, it's my personal Facebook.
Yeah, of course. Right. Cool. So thank you again always for joining us. We'll catch you again next time. And everybody, stay safe, be well, and we'll see you later.
Bye.
Nintendo controls 80% of the video market. But no matter how you play the game, or which game you play, things definitely have come a long way since Pac-Man.
Now you're playing with power.